Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're running just a couple minutes behind, but all of the people who need to be here are here, and we're excited about this event this afternoon. It's always a rare treat to get to talk with James Lee Burke, and today we have guest interviewer Brian Panowich, who's also one of our store favorites. So I think we're going to have a great time. As always, if you're interested in our other upcoming virtual events, you can find those at murderbooks.com or on Facebook. We keep all of our events listed on Facebook, and we're going to get all the September ones loaded up there today too, so you can have a preview of what's coming in September. James Lee Burke is here today to talk about his brand new book, Another Kind of Eden. And I want to just mention that we do have, as always, signed copies available if you're interested in ordering. I have put a link in the comments where you can find information about both authors' books. And of course, if you are so inclined to order, the link there to Murder by the Book to get the signed copy of Another Kind of Eden or any of Brian's books as well. It's already in the comments and the live chat. And speaking of comments and live chat, if you have questions, don't be shy. The best events that we put on have audience interaction. So there's no such thing as a dumb question. You can have a question for either author, both authors. Comments, go ahead and put those in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on Facebook. Okay, now to get to the reason we're all here, I'm going to get James Lee Burke here on screen. Hi.
Oh, Lordy. My heavens. Okay. Hi, Pearl. I'm on the air. Hello, Pearl. I'll call you back, okay? Are you okay? Hang on.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and let that go for just a second, and we're going to bring on Brian and get Brian introduced.
I'm sorry. I've got a thing going on right now. So understood.
All right. So, Brian, I always love our authors with a new release, but my favorite people are the volunteer guest interviewers because it makes my life easy. So let me get your official introduction going right here, and then we'll bring Jim back on. It looks like he might be off the phone. So Brian Panowich is an award-winning author, a Georgia firefighter, and a father to 4 incredible children. His first novel, Bull Mountain, was an LA Times Book Prize finalist, ITW Thriller Award winner for Best First Novel, Southern Book Prize winner, and a finalist for both the Anthony and the Barry Awards. And he lives in Georgia with his family. Hard Cash Valley was also a Barnes & Noble book club pick, which is a huge deal. And as always, we are big fans of yours. So thanks again for being here and interviewing. Okay, looks like Jim is back and available. Hi.
Yeah. Hello.
So I'm going to do your formal introduction, Jim, and then we're going to get the show on the road. So James Lee Burke is a New York Times bestselling author, 2-time winner of the Edgar Award, and the recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship for Creative Arts and Fiction. He's authored 39 novels and 2 short story collections, and he lives in Missoula, Montana. So as I said, he's here today to talk about Another Kind of Eden, which we have signed copies available. And I am going to go away. I'm going to be here in case there are any technical issues. Just rest assured, I'll pop back on like magic. And then at the after about 35 or 40 minutes, we're going to go ahead and open it up to audience questions. So like I said, don't be shy. Put your questions in the comments. All right, you guys, have fun.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm well. I've been seeing you travel the virtual country this week. You having a good time?
Well, it's a pretty easy job.
I imagine. I saw you talking with John Grisham. That was pretty incredible. And then I saw you talking with Charlene, which was pretty incredible. And now you're talking with me. I feel like I'm on this list of stellar superstar writers, man. It makes me feel pretty good.
No, all of you have been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it.
Well, it's been cool listening to some of your history and some of your backstories. I get a kick out of that. We're going to get into that. And you know what? Before we get into the guts of this, Another Kind of Eden, which has pretty much crept into my second favorite Holland book outside of Wayfaring Stranger. I want to just ask you a question off the top of my head, and it's been bugging me for about a week now after listening to you talk to other folks. And what kind of music do you listen to, Jim?
Oh, just all kinds. I love music.
Like, I know that we've talked
But
about
no,
Waylon Jennings before, but like when
yeah.
you think about what kind of stuff really just motivates you, what can you tell the fans?
Well, country and western, bluegrass, big, folk music, but jazz, real big, rock and roll, my lordy, and I like classical music as well. I mean,
Well, rock and
it's
roll is well rooted in
the
your stuff.
music of this, yeah, but it's the music of the spheres. I believe that's what art's about. You listen to the music of the spheres.
Does music play a part in your process at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. I do. I have some stringed instruments about in the house, and I stop and I play. There's a lot of door slamming when I do that. I don't know what that means.
Maybe at the end of this we can get our guitars out and pick a little bit, man. That'd be something I ain't never seen before.
Yeah, but golly, I've seen a lot of the greats. When I was growing up on the Gulf Coast, oh, I saw people like, my heavens, everyone. I saw Brubeck and Louis Armstrong, Smiley Lewis. Gee whiz, we lived in L.A. too, Los Angeles for a while. We used to go down to the after-hour bars, and all the people who worked in the television stations would come in and jam. Boy, to see a great artist, and I know a lot of them too today.
I can only assume that a lot of great artists read your books and are inspired to write their music, whereas you listen to their music and are inspired to write your stories.
I do.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I got a note from Loretta Lynn just not long ago, or she passed on something. She passed on the blessing of my music, because I love Loretta Lynn. Oh, she's just great.
Life's got to be
Miner's
here from
Daughter is just a great film.
That's cool. That's just it's a part of your existence that I wasn't familiar with until watching your interviews, and I think that's mad cool. Okay, so let's talk about Another Kind of Eden. This is Aaron Holland's book. He is he's the grandson of Hackberry. He's the youngest, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the second Aaron book. Jealous Kind was the first one, which was amazing. And then he tells that story from the point of view as a kid. He's a kid, and then he's a grown man falling in love in this book. He is head over heels in this book, and it causes him some grief. It takes place during the Cuban Missile Crisis. What was your reasoning for setting it during that time period?
Well, as you and I have talked about this before. It seems to me it's a portal year. That's the year in which we stepped into another dimension, or another, let's say,
I love that
evolution of our country. But it was the year in which we almost incinerated the earth, and it was John Kennedy who said, had the Cuban Missile Crisis not been resolved, and it came within 2 hours of actually being World War III, 185 million Americans would have died in the first month in the aftermath.
It's interesting to me how you almost pull off a hat trick in this book, to where you that's going on in the novel, but it's a very human story. And it's a love story, actually,
Yes.
And it has everything to do with humans and this very everyman story. But it has this massive agenda in the background that you pay attention to. But it's not a political novel at all. But it's cool how you shine a light on things that are very, very important, almost in a subversive way. I do that with my coffee mug. But I can't do it with my books but you do a hell of a job at that.
Well, you make a good point. No, when art becomes political, it is no longer art. It's didactic, and proselytizing is poison, and it has no place in art. I mean, I mean, Shakespeare was actually a very political writer, but you don't know that he's a political writer. Jesus was a political figure. He challenged the establishment, Romans. But anyway, I'm very proud of this novel. And as you say, the love story in it is, I think, a very good love story. And the young woman with whom Aaron falls in love is just a great young person. And she's an artist. She's an oil painter obsessed with the Ludlow massacre. And she tries to give voice to the victims of that terrible incident that took place in 1914.
I tell you what, I fell in love with her too. So you wrote a character that just like I started thinking about like frequently after I'd set the book down.
Yeah, and she's not afraid. She's not afraid of anything.
No, it's a very, very strong, wonderfully written character. In fact, she has such a hold over Aaron. There's a scene in the book that really took me off guard, where Aaron's there's father figure's woman is hitting on him, trying to seduce him, and Aaron is mortified. And most men would take that as some sort of even if it is their father figure's significant other, they would still take it as, hey, I'm something else if they're trying to seduce me. He doesn't think that way at all. He's so into this woman that he's just completely ripped up, like he's not having it. And that scene was so wonderfully written. Props for making Aaron probably the classiest hackberry yet.
Well, he's a very good young man, and he's tormented, of course, by the loss of his own father that happened in his late teens, and he has not overcome that loss. And now he's afraid he's going to lose this beautiful young woman. She's only 19 years old, but far more mature than a 19-year-old. But also he has many memories that he cannot deal with from the Korean War.
This book, just as far as I'm thinking about the timeline, Jealous Kind is when he's a kid, and then this one is as a grown man. And you've talked a few times about what's coming next. If we look at the time jumps, if you did that again, it would be perfect to set it up for modern day. And so, can you talk to us about what's coming next after this?
Well, I've already finished the sequel to this book. And the sequel stands independently, as this book, Another Kind of Eden, stands independently. But the same character narrates the story, but it's the year 2021 when he's an old man. And it's quite a book. It's a unique book, I have to say. But this one is too. I've never written one like it. This, of course, goes into the supernatural, into science fiction, perhaps. But actually, it's also an extension of the way I've used myth or mythology in the past. I always have believed that great art, if it is to be great art, must reach into the past. If we do not tell the whole story about the human race. The human race is the origin of all art is in the unconscious. I believe in Carl, my head went blank, the psychiatrist Jung. Carl Jung believed that we inherit racial memory. And I think to deny that, to deny the neurosis that allows us the conduit into the unconscious is a mistake. In other words, that an impairment is a blessing.
Well, I'm in good shape then. I'm impaired as hell.
That's it. And if anyone has ever out there been to a psychiatrist or a therapist, the first meeting always consists of the same. First question: do you ever hear voices? And of course, I always said, of course not. Well, why? Because the psychiatrist will have you in a straitjacket. you will be lobotomized before you get out of the building. All artists hear the golly, what's the Mormon Tabernacle Choir blasting with noise all the time. Golly, my head is a marching brass band. I think we talked the other day, didn't we, about someone asked Hemingway if he ever saw a psychiatrist. He said, yeah, every day, Dr. Smith Corona.
Yeah, and that's true. That's usually how a lot of writers or artists, especially genius writers or artists or create anything, they suffer from like a mental illness, just like you're talking about, and that's how they quote sometimes. You know, alcohol. A lot of us go down from alcohol because that's a way to just calm everybody down in your head. Yeah. So he was right.
That's how Neruda said that. It's funny you phrase it that way.
Pablo Neruda.
Pablo Neruda said that. He said it will allow you insularity and a certain kind of serenity, and you free yourself from distractions. But very soon you'll pay the price. You will have learned nothing, and you will have mortgaged tomorrow for today, and eventually it will impair your art, rob you of your faith in your art, and eventually take your soul.
It's very true. I love that that you're into Pablo Neruda. I recently just got into him several years ago. A friend of mine turned me on to his love sonnets, and they're brilliant. The 100 love sonnets that he wrote for his wife. I ended up putting number 16, Love Sonnet 16, as the last page to my most recent novel, Hard Cash Valley. It was the ending of the book was Pablo Neruda's number 16. He's famous for 17, but I think he nailed it in 16. As far as love sonnets go, it's just brilliant. Brought me to tears. And if that's not mental illness, I don't know what is. But so that's the idea of bringing the Hollands into modern day excites the, excuse my language, but shit out of me. I can't wait. I cannot wait. And like I said, this the subversive quality of being able to talk about what's going on in the background behind these stories is amazing. But politics aside, talk to me about your bad guys, because you write some incredibly three-dimensional bad guys. And in this book in particular, the cult leader that Aaron comes up against, you were talking about supernatural. This guy is scary as hell. And can you tell me where he came from?
Well, I'm not sure which one you meant. Did you mean the academic?
The academic, yeah.
The fella, the academic. Yeah, he's a manipulator. He appears to be a flower child, an older flower child, but he's a Mansonian kind of figure. Maybe a better term is Jones, Jim Jones.
Jim Jones,
same kind of man. To use the difficulties of others against their own, but their own. I'm sorry, I just hang on. Pardon me, I should have gotten a Coca-Cola. To use what is good in people against them, and to exploit the young people is it's a terrible violation of the ethos that we should pursue. I mean, but anyway, that said, he's an academic and a really just absolutely awful guy. And of course, he's involved earlier in the story with Joanne McGuffey. Excuse me, but I need my tongue. I got to get a cough drop. I'm just a little hoarse today. Anyway, he's a terrible fellow, but maybe the one who is the one that does the most injury are the people whom Aaron trusts. I don't want to give away the story. But the original title of this book was The Pillars of Heaven, because he's climbed out of a freight car and gotten a job on this dairy farm and produce farm outside of Trinidad, Colorado. And it's an Edenic place. And he thinks he's actually found a paradise. And this is what he believes we should, when people use that expression at work and play in the fields of the Lord, he thinks he's discovered that place, but he doesn't see some of the signals that he should. And they, in effect, misdirect him into a terrible denouement spiritually. You see, the story also involves Mexican farm workers or migrant farm workers. And this is how Aaron describes him. He goes to a dinner at a very poor Catholic church out in not far from where the Ludlow massacre took place. And all of these poor people are there. And it's, of course, a great event for them. They have this huge dinner in the school cafeteria, and it's late at night, and the priest speaks to them in Spanish, and they're all holding votive candles. And Aaron says when he looks into their faces, the seams in their faces, the work-worn despair that some of them seem to carry with them like a shroud. And the way they're dressed, he says they dress like they went to a washateria and pulled clothes without any thought of who owned them and put them on. They're always mismatched. But he said they have a holiness about them that he can't describe. And then he says he believes that these would have been the people Christ would have associated with 2,000 years ago had they been around. These are the people that Jesus, in effect, would befriend and would be proud to be among. He said Jesus would not be, so I think he puts it, he didn't hang around with the Chamber of Commerce. But anyway, we lived in a village in a very primitive part of Mexico. This is many years ago, 1961, my wife and I and our little baby boy. And it's a very primitive place. Men carried firearms. There were two guards, Mexican Army guards, who rode on top of the rural bus that went into Guadalajara because the bandits often stopped the bus and robbed it. But anyway, the people there just seemed to me like holy people. I always felt that way. I belonged to, I don't want to get off all that, but anyway, I'm going to eat this pill right here. This cough drop. I'm sorry. I eat those Ritz crackers sometimes. And boy, they're just like, I'm going to stop eating Ritz crackers. Like thumbtacks in your throat.
Ritz crackers, they're thumbtacks for your throat. They won't be hiring you to do their marketing.
No, I gotta apologize. I love Ritz crackers, and I eat tons of them right before an interview. That's not smart.
Well,
who wants to be smart?
This thing. So, hey, listen. Any tangents that you end up going off on are completely fine with me. I think that they're infinitely more interesting than some of the more basic author interview questions. And for example, I'm not going to ask you about your process because, guys, anybody out there listening, writers that are out there listening to us, he has spoke about his process on a couple of different videos from this tour, and you'll be able to go to jamesleeburke.com and watch those recordings of him talking about his process and some various other things. So I thought that I would take a little time to ask you some questions that nobody hasn't asked you yet. Like, for example, your dialogue, as far as writer advice is concerned, dialogue is something that you're famous for good reason, because it is solid and very human dialogue. Elmore Leonard was a genius at it. You're a genius at it.
Yeah.
And stilted dialogue can pull you right out of a story and wreck the whole thing. So how have you honed the skill of people just talking to each other?
It's listening. It's that simple. You have to be a good listener. A good writer is a good listener. He also is a good witness. And the real writer is not a creator. He's a witness to the experience of others.
That is awesome advice. A real writer is a witness, not a creator. I love that.
That's it.
Well,
you have to see the story. It's always there. The story is always there. You just have to listen and to look at it. This has been my experience in life. The real gladiators are standing right next to you in the grocery line, and they're 85 pounds soaking wet. They are so nondescript, you cannot remember what they look like 5 minutes after they walk out of the store. But they are the people who have the big stories. They're the ones who are just absolutely fearless, and they always, almost always, do the right thing under very critical and dangerous circumstances. How did Orwell put it? I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close to it. He said, people are always better than we think they are. They keep their mouths shut in the torture chamber. They go down with the decks awash and the guns blazing. And then he said, nothing can equal the indomitability and courage of the average human being. And that's why he had this great love for the poor, for the oppressed.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And he's dropping gold on you guys right now. He's dropping golden nuggets of wisdom on you guys right now.
Yeah, but that's from Orwell. I had to get it from someone else.
That's okay. That's okay. As long as you're forwarding the information. If anybody has a question for Mr. Burke, please drop it in the chat so that Murder by Book can throw it out to me and I can ask him while he's on the air. No questions are out of bounds. No questions are out of bounds. Ask him anything you want. He made that
clear.
Call
me Jim too. Mister's for old people.
All right. So try and trip Jim up with a question. I would love to see that. I don't think it's possible. Okay, so back to book business. So when we talk about your process, you've talked at length about how you sit down every single day, 7 days a week. You write 750 words a day, at least you try to, and that is what produces a book a year for you. And that's a method that you found that works for you on the regular. When you are finished with a book, let me ask you about your revision process. How frequently do you go back through your first draft, second draft, third draft before you have something that you're ready to turn in?
Usually when I get to the end, that's pretty it. Pretty much got it locked up. But it's because I rewrite every day during the composition of the work in its entirety. In other words, I start each day hoping that I can get 750 words. And then the next morning, I rewrite that 750 words and then begin the next 750 words. And I do it every day. And then I sometimes go back once in a while and go through, say, maybe 100 or 200 pages. But usually when I get to the the bottom of the ninth, I've got it. It all works out okay.
Awesome. And do you pass it on to Alifair or anyone else read your books before they get dropped in the mail?
Pearl reads them, and Aaron Mitchell.
Aaron gets to read them. Oh,
those are my right hand people.
Cool. I'm gonna have her call me and read them to me on the phone.
Yeah.
All right. And so at the end of the day, what?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
Sean, Sean Manning is my editor at Simon and Schuster. He's a great editor. I mean, he's a very fine fellow too.
You've talked in the past about some writers that have inspired you and have kept you. You said, I think the quote was you read learners that you. I'm paraphrasing here, but you read writers that you can learn from, right? As opposed to just reading bad writing. What can you elaborate a little bit on that? Like what to learn and what it considers bad writing?
Well, you know the expression, don't watch bad tennis. You know, if you ever play tennis, you always hear that on the court. You watch bad tennis and it somehow messes up your own timing. Same thing with your art. There's so many good writers. Why try to learn from people who are not very good at it? And you can tell, as a rule, within 2 or 3 sentences of the first paragraph of a writer, whether or not he has that kind of magic that you want to discover in yourself. But anyway, there are all kinds of writers in the American tradition, starting way back with Nathaniel Hawthorne, and of course, some of his, colleagues or contemporaries. But I think, for me at least, the first American writer was Nathaniel Hawthorne. James Fenimore Cooper, of course, gave us the leather stocking tales, which really is the origin of the Western novel and the police novel, or the noir film. It's actually the beginnings of existentialism. Remember Hawkeye and Deerslayer. But for me, the people I learned from are as following: Ernest Hemingway, William Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, certainly James T. Farrell, John Steinbeck, Nathaniel Hawthorne, because Hawthorne reached into that dark place of Puritan experience, and evidently, one of his ancestors, maybe it was his grandfather or great-grandfather, was one of the judges that sent those poor people at Salem to their deaths, and that he was trying to atone for his ancestor. But in my book here, I make use of that Puritan tradition. The foreword to the book is about Nathaniel Hawthorne. And Hawthorne saw something in the Puritan mix there in 1692 that later on John Adams and Thomas Jefferson talked about in their letters to each other. They wrote to each other an aggregate of just about 1,200 letters, but both of them, who died on July 4th, 1825, had the same concern. They believed that rebellious light, that Republican light of the 18th century, the age of reason, was being replaced by a different kind of American middle class that was more involved with profit, self-aggrandizement, than the kind of pure idealism that was characteristic of the earlier men and women who were truly children of the Enlightenment. And so that Puritan, put it this way, there was a British ambassador, and I forget his name, that when Kennedy was elected, he made a comment at a cocktail party, and he said, "I fear for your president." Someone else said, "Why?" This British ambassador said, "Mr. Kennedy is not aware that this is still a very Puritan country, and that's going to get him in trouble." It's still a Puritan. What is a Puritan? What do Puritans do when they rebel? The first thing they do is take off their clothes. They've got these things on the brain. This is it. This country is obsessed with sex. Look, okay, I don't mean to belabor the point and or beat up on poor Richard Nixon, but Nixon said something once I couldn't ever forget. He was talking about a group that he said, I liked them. I really liked them. But why do they have to talk about their sex all the time? Why can't they leave the rest of us, give the rest of us a break? And I thought, I can't believe that Richard Nixon made me laugh. For God's sakes, give it a break.
Richard Nixon makes you laugh.
What you're doing.
See, this is why you tuned in, folks. This is why you tuned in. All right, Jim. Jim, we have our first question. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
It's Taylor.
I want to clarify that applies. That what he said, what Nixon said, applies to every group. It's not just one. It doesn't matter. The people that just can't wait to get on camera and tell people what they did last night.
That's how it is for everybody. You're right. That's the American way. Jim, you can get famous doing that now. Groups of people can get famous doing nothing but get on camera and say what you did last night. It's a whole category of profession now.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
You don't have to be good at anything except confession, and you can become rich and famous.
Guy's got his sackcloth and ashes. He brought his own. Got him on his backpack. Ready to rock.
All right, man. let's reel it in a little bit because you're gonna bust my gut here. Okay, so we have a lovely question from an admirer who would like to know, Jim, if you could have dinner with any author, whether that be alive or dead, who would it be? And fetching back to the folks that you talked about, probably. So if you could have dinner with a writer, living or dead.
Geoffrey Chaucer.
Geoffrey Chaucer. Why is that?
Oh, the characters in the Canterbury Tales are just, no one has ever equaled them. I used to teach British literature a bit. Yeah, I did. I taught it a lot. But anyway, I used to tell the class, I'd say, you may forget everything you have learned in college, but I guarantee you, you will never forget the Miller's Tale. It's a tattoo on the brain for the rest of your life.
Good answer. Good answer. I think
it's hilarious stuff.
I'm being called in Murdered by the Book. Hey, we're going a little off the rails. Is that cool?
It's perfect. I mean, look, we don't want every interview to be the same, and this one has certainly been entertaining. We do have some questions, so I'm going to go ahead and pull those on here. And the first one is from Christopher. Mr. Burke, where does a story start for you? A character, a scene, an image, or a line of dialogue?
That's a very good question. And my answer to that always, and I tell myself this, it's in media res, the Latin term for in the middle of things. You start, this is how you start the story. You kick the door open with a baseball bat and walk into the living room. That's how you open a story. That's it. Remember what Dizzy Dean said when he was asked about how he pitched a ball? He says, I pick it up, my chunks it. I
Brian,
picks it up and I chunks it.
Brian, is that kind of your approach too, or what comes to you first with your writing?
It's interesting that he says it that way. Usually that's what I do is I try to find that opening sequence that's going to just jaw drop you and then take it from there. But every one of my books starts differently. Hard Cash Valley was a question. Bull Mountain was a plot. Like Lions was pure character. I didn't even have a story there and didn't care because I was just enveloped by these characters and I wanted just to let them take over. So every book starts off with a different kernel for me, which is I've come to find out is abnormal. Most people have the same kind of process, and my books hit me in different ways. The one I'm working on now is a 100% love story that is character driven, and I didn't even have a plot when I started writing it. It's almost like I was a conduit for two different voices in my head, Jim. You know, and I had these two voices saying, "Write me, write me, write me, write me, write me," and don't you got no time to do shit else. Do this, and I didn't have a choice. So, but mental illness is my skill.
Okay, another question for Jim. Where is Aaron headed at the end of the book, both figuratively and literally? And I will say, okay, no spoilers if possible.
Well, that said, I don't want to undo the ending of the book, or put it this way, that this story is not simply about Aaron and the experience he has had, but it's about America. And he has seen the worst and the best of it. But we see that a brighter day is awaiting for him. But we also see in those last images that the shadows and the light are the challenge. The shadow and the light are the challenge. That what is the light? Where is it? Where is it emanating from? And what does the darkness around the edges of the picture indicate for us? That's the challenge that we're always caught with. That in 4 o'clock in the morning, I never know what's real. I wake every morning at 4 o'clock, and I do not know what is real. And I sometimes think that maybe there's specters out there, but I'm reaching a little bit here into, look, this is the way I feel about writing, but I feel this would apply to all the arts. That my father said this once. He said when I was about 15 or 16, he said, art and science are simply the incremental discovery of what God has already created. That's it. That's it. But you have to understand what's good and what's evil. And I think maybe that in some ways the artist is like Diogenes. I use that metaphor often. Diogenes was the 4th century BC Greek philosopher, always looking for the honest man. It's a metaphor for the man who is always looking for the truth. And that's what we all seek, I think. And also, it was Socrates who said, the unexamined life is worthless. That's it. The unexamined life is worthless. So the artist is somehow, in many ways, as my father suggested, an explorer and a discoverer, but it's already there. We don't create it. Look, this is how I feel. I never understood many things about the great mysteries, and I still don't. But I do believe that the artist is blessed in one singular fashion. Namely, he is allowed to participate in the only, he is allowed to be a participant, not only in art, but in creation, which makes him like someone dipping his hand into a baptismal fount. In effect, he shares that commonality with the Creator. In other words, what is the greatest gift that one can have? It is creativity. And it can come in many ways, but it's in every human being. It's a matter of discovery, as my father suggested.
All right. So we have another question here. I'm just going to paraphrase. So Jennifer was wondering if you ever reflect on the legacy that your writing has provided, as well as the influence that you've had on so many successful writers. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's very complimentary. I don't know if I can claim a large influence. I'd like to feel that, but I learned it from others as well. And Brian said something very interesting early on about the dialogue that's drifting around there in the air. But again, I think maybe empathy has a lot to do with it. And what's strange, though, that there are artists, people who have great talent, who understand their fellow man and write compassionately of them, but who in their own lives are actually absolutely terrible people. Or how about obnoxious is a better term. They're not evil, but my heavens, I was at the Bread Loaf Writers Conference many years ago, 1970. I was a Bread Loaf Fellow. And Robert Frost lived only 3 miles away in Ripton. And I did not see this. But anyway, it was legendary there. Archibald MacLeish came to give a poetry reading, and the place was packed. And then Robert Frost came in late, of course, and he was in the back pew here in the chapel. That's part of the Middlebury campus or summer campus. Anyway, and he found the papers in the pew there, and he set fire to them. He started a fire in the middle of Archibald MacLeish's reading. But Frost, I think, I don't want to say other things. I think the one member of his family wouldn't go visit him on his deathbed. This kindly old gentleman had another personality as well. There are others. I don't want to mention names. One of them, I don't want to mention the other names, even if they're dead. But they're artists that can be a real pain in the neck. That's the short version.
So we had a question here. I'm going to go ahead and pop on the screen, even though I think we all know the answer. Is your son also a writer? And we all know about, obviously, Alifair, and that she is a published writer, but is your son also a writer?
No, well, he writes actually very well, but no, he's an attorney. My son, James Lee, he's the third. Yeah, no, he's an attorney.
All right. Brian, did you have anything to add, or did you have any other questions? We have run out of audience questions. I think we've exhausted all the topics today, from Neruda to Chaucer and everything in between, including Ritz crackers. So
I could ask Jim 100,000 different things. We could talk all night. I love his whole concept of hijacking Christianity. I wanted to talk to him about that, but maybe we should do that on a phone call someday.
Yeah.
But, just to tack on a little bit to what that last question was about, I mean, Jim, you have quite the legacy, and there'd be no Brian Panowich without James Lee Burke. Just a fact. If I hadn't have read Robichaux, I would not have been informed enough to be able to create Clayton Burroughs, and that's a fact. So, to answer that question that was asked, the influence on writers, like I'm not going to say I'm a young spring chicken or anything, but because I'm 50 years old. But man, like you had an inspiration on me to where I know I would not be sitting here talking to you had I not been inspired enough by your Robo-Show and Holland series to be able to do this.
Well, thank you. It's very nice of you.
Well,
You're
and of
welcome,
course,
man. I'm just,
Yeah.
I call them like I see them, man.
Yeah.
No smoke up your ass at all.
Well, there's if someone were to ask me, what's the best book to read if you want to learn how to write a great crime novel? The best crime novel I've ever written, have ever read, is Dennis Lehane's Mystic River. Just that book, I can't believe that anyone wrote a crime novel this good. It's unbeatable. And it's one of those kind that you feel that there's magic in it. And then when you get to the end of it, you realize it's not simply a crime novel. It's the story, again, of America. The Irish ended up in Saudi. Oh, my heavens, and the loss of it is an extraordinary experience. And then when you read something like that, you know that you can do it too. It's just a matter of not quitting. That's it. You never quit. You never quit.
well, I can't think of a better way to end than that. Never quit. If you're an aspiring writer out there, just button seat and never quit.
That's it.
Brian, thank you so much for doing a wonderful job with this interview today. And Jim, as always, it's a treat to talk with you. Links in the comments for ordering both authors' books. And I'm going to go ahead and say that we've had a good afternoon and we are done. Thanks to everyone for watching. I'm going to sign us all off. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Greatest bookstore in the country.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you to both of you. And Jim, love to your family as always.
Well, same to you.
Thanks.